Okay, let's get started. So last video I made was kind of a mess, and it was kind of out there and uh, not very well structured. And I tried to do too much. I tried to introduce structs and types at the same time, and those two things are actually different. They're not the same thing in Go. A lot of times when you talk about classes in a language, you're talking about types at that point. But with Go, we really can tease those two apart. So we'll start by talking about type rather than structs. Um, so what's a type? A type is kind of like a definition of a noun. So if we have something like a car, um, we say it's a type of vehicle. And of all the vehicles, so vehicle is a type, right? Car is a type of vehicle. It's got everything the vehicle has plus some additional features. And then we can think about for example, Toyota. Toyota is a type of car. It's everything a car is, and by extension, everything a vehicle is. But it adds its own Toyota-ness to the concept. So we'll start by looking at ability scores in Dungeons and Dragons. And so they're used when you need to do some sort of check like a persuasion check, and they provide a modifier for that check, or if you also use them to help determine initiative and whether or not you hit something, etc. So let's bring in our random dice rolling uh, library. So we're going to go get github.com dark ink random roll. Okay. Oh, forgot to initialize the module. So go mod init github.com dark ink. Now you don't have to, you can, this doesn't have to be like a real uh, thing on GitHub, and you don't have to use dark ink at going 05. You can name it whatever you want to, but um, that's what I'm using. So, but you do have to use if you are using my library and you haven't set your own up in GitHub, you do need to use this to go ahead and bring in the random roll library. And let's create get going 05. Now, I like to name my kind of root file in a library the same name as the, well, sorry, in a package, the same name as the package. Uh, I called it literally get going 05. So we can right click, rename, and fix that, right? Okay, so, all right, now we're good. So we're going to say package, and this is going to be another main. And let's do func main. And as we let's go ahead and talk about abilities. So we're going to say ability is equal to random roll dot roll a stat, and we're going to use 4 dice. So printf, and let's just print out the ability. All right, and as I save it, of course, the Go support in Visual Studio Code adds in my import. So now we can go run. Okay, so we generated an ability. The value was 13. And we go ahead and print it out. All right, let me just take a sip of coffee. And we'll write a function to calculate the modifier. So func modifier. And we are going to take an ability, which is an integer, And the function is to subtract 10 from the ability, divide by 2, and round down. But we'll go ahead and use a switch statement. So we've got something like the table. So so we're going to say switch 1, switch on ability, case 1. This is makes it a little bit easier to translate directly from the table. Oh, and this returns a integer, right? So case 2. 2, 3, return -4. Case 4, 5, return -3. Case 6, 7, return -2. Case 8, 9. Oops, this is 10, 11. And I'm only going to do this up to, say, 20 or 19 or 21 or something. 18, 19. And so forth. All right. And as a default case, so there. By giving you a default case, Go detects that we do always return something. So, okay. So ability comes back as roll a stat. And modifier is, and we get on ability, right? It's a modifier on ability. Okay, so the ability is 13. So the ability score is 13, and the modifier is +1. So that means, let's say for this example, this is charisma, and we have a charisma of 13, and we're running a persuasion check. The persuasion check gives us a 13, gives us a +1 on our persuasion check. Okay. Great. And we can, one of the nice things about using Visual Studio Code's Go support is we can go ahead and collapse this so we don't have to look at it all the time. Go ahead and collapse that. But here's the thing, we don't just, I mean, it's not really, an ability isn't just some sort of random integer, right? An ability is a thing, and an ability has a modifier, but like if we roll a d20 or a d8, that doesn't really produce a modifier in this sense, right? So let's say ability is a type. So we're going to say ability is a type of integer. Now we do that by saying type and then the name of the type, and then what's a type of. So in this case, it's a type of integer. So now we have a noun in our system, just like a car was a noun that added something to vehicle. We now have a noun for ability in our system, which is a type of int and extends from int. Now, one of the things we can do is we can take our modifier function, since modifiers don't really apply to random numbers in the game, just any old number, we can make it a method function on an ability. And the way we do this is by adding the ability as a parameter. It really is basically just a parameter in front of the function name. Normally we add parameters in this section, but in this case we're adding the type that this method works on to the front. Since we're passing the ability, essentially passing it as the first parameter essentially to the function or the method, we can go ahead and remove it from here, and in our code we can just say switch A, right? So now we can, instead of doing it this way, we can say ability, so random roll a stat. We can say var ability is a type of ability. Now, we don't use, since we're declaring the variable, we don't use the colon equals, which creates an implicit variable. So we get rid of the colon, and we see that this is an integer. This is an ability. An integer is not an ability. So a vehicle, so think of it this way. If you were handed a random vehicle, it could be a tugboat, it could be a 747, or it could be a car. If I were to hand you a random vehicle, you couldn't necessarily guarantee it was a car, much less a Toyota. So what we need to do is make sure that this is an ability if we're going to put it in a variable that holds an ability. And we'll do that by going ahead and saying, okay, we're going to wrap you in an ability. Okay, now we're good. If we had, instead of using a function call, just said 5, it would have been fine because Go would have said, oh, you meant 5 is an ability, and that is legal because ability is a kind of int. But we're using a random roll, which is a function that returns specifically an int, and specifically an int is not the same thing as an ability, so that's why we have to wrap this in an ability. And this raises an interesting issue, is maybe we need another version of our library that has the concept of an ability if we're going to have this, and this maybe should be called roll ability. But let's not worry about that right now. So we have an ability. So the ability is ability and modifier. So if we run it, we see the same thing. We see that the ability is a 13 and the modifier is a 1. Fantastic. When we think of a character in Dungeons and Dragons, it is a collection of abilities. Now, these abilities are strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. For different classes in Dungeons and Dragons, or different, if you're not familiar with the game, professions in the game, certain abilities are more important than others. For example, if you're a fighter, strength is very important. Dexterity is important, but maybe a little less so. Constitution, maybe that's third on your list. And then you don't care about the other three. When likewise, if you are a wizard, intelligence is important. If you're a cleric, wisdom's important. So different roles or different classes in Dungeons and Dragons have different abilities that are important. And generally, when we're making a character, if I'm a DM, I might want to say, okay, go ahead and roll 4 6-sided dice, write down what you get, and then put those things in the order that you'd like. Um, we'll do something similar. We'll create. We'll use the slice that we did earlier, that we used earlier when we did our random roll. We'll use a slice and we'll say a character is a slice of abilities, and we'll go ahead and just copy this 6 times, right? Great, okay. Now, if we do, we go ahead and print the character. Okay, so that's nice, but like I said, if we're making a fighter, we'll want the 17 that we got back to be the strength, right? And we want the maybe the 14th to be dexterity, the 13th to be you constitution, and then the other ones are personal preference but aren't as important. So part of type, or part of the notion of a type, is to indicate what methods you support. In this case, ability supports the modifier method, which returns back the modifier for a given ability. Well, let's create a new type, and we will give it, we'll make it based on a slice of abilities. Okay, so character is a slice of abilities. And we're going to generate, we're going to create a couple of functions. One, we're going to have and we'll pass in and that lets us be able to send in the number of dice we want to be able to use. See, we've got a really generous dungeon master that says, hey, you're allowed to use 5 or 6 or 7 or 8, however many d6. But we'll allow it to send in a number of dice, and we'll return back a character. This function that produces an instance of a given type is what we often call a constructor. So we'll go ahead and just return this, right? So we can say return, and this will return a slice, which is our ability. Now, as you can tell, the slice, so we can change this from this to there. So if we run this, oops. Okay, we see we got the character. Okay, great. Still, they're not in sorted order. Now, in order to be sortable, a type has to support some methods. So there's a built-in sorting package for Go, but a type has to support some methods. So, in fact, the methods it has to support are, and we're going to say func len is the first one, which returns an int, which returns the length of the list of things we need to sort, or the, if it's not a list, whatever we want to think of as the length of our stuff. In this case, we are doing a slice, so len is simply the length of the slice. Okay. The next function we need to support is swap. And these are all defined in the type sort.interface. Don't confuse that with a regular interface. It's sort.interface, but we need to support swap. So swap is simply CI CJ is equal to CJ CI. And the next thing we need to do is support less. And oh, weird, I can't drag the oh, that's curious. Let's go ahead and open up a new window then. Oh, maybe because I've got it full screen. Okay. Let's go ahead and just do a quick look at Golang. And documents. And package documentation. And taking a quick look at the sort, just to let you know I'm not just making this stuff up. I actually have read the documentation for this. And I encourage you to get familiar with this documentation because it's very, very useful. It doesn't list the types. Anyway, so there we go. So the interface type in the sort package, which is separate from the concept of a type called interface, we need to support len. Okay, we got that. We need to support swap. Got that. And less. Return C I less than C. Okay, if we do all that, if our type supports these methods, we can pass it to sort. So we can say character, and we can say sort. Let's go ahead and close this. How do I close this? Ah, okay, well, I'm stuck with that for now. That's sad. So if we run it, now we see that the values are in ascending order. And so if we just do sort.reverse, and why do we have the red squiggly? Oh, reverse is wait. Let's find out real quick. What does reverse take? Ah, interesting. Not listed here. Anyway. Oh, returns a sort.interface. Okay. Let's not worry about that then. So yes, so now we have it in sorted order. So if I take the last value and we can say, let's add a new method on here called best. What's our best ability in our character? And it returns back an ability. Return, and this is the length of the character minus 1, which remember, slices are numbered starting at 0, so we have 6 abilities, so it's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so our best ability is our last ability, which is at index 5. Notice I use len on here. Len is the function that I use on slices, but remember, I defined a character to be a slice, a kind of slice. So I can't necessarily always just say uh, create a variable that holds a character and just assign a slice into it, because not all slices are characters. But what I can say is that given I have a character, I could use len on it because character is a kind of slice and slices have a length. So now if I say best ability and oh, I've got 2 commas, that's what's driving it nuts. So now if I go run this, I see that the character, their best ability is a 17. So that is the one that I would assign as the score to my primary character statistics for a given class. So if it's a fighter, I'd want to use the best score as strength. Okay. So let's just take a quick moment to recap what we've looked at. So we started the concept of a type, and a type, as I said at the beginning, is a kind of thing. It's essentially a noun. And the nouns in Go are built on other nouns. In this case, we created an ability, which is a type of integer. And what makes it different from an integer, just a regular random integer, is we've got this notion of modifier. And so there's some method on ability which looks at the value of that ability and returns back the modifier for that ability. Then we created another type, which is called character, which is a slice of abilities. We created a constructor function to initialize a character of a new character. And then we added 3 methods on it to make it sortable. And when we added these 3 methods, we actually added some more type information to character. We made it, by adding these 3 methods, we made it the same thing as an interface in the sort package. And because it supports these methods and it's now a type of sort.interface, we can sort it, meaning we can say, okay, put all the values in order. And once all the values are in order, we can ask for the best value. And in fact, we could, if we wanted to, just make this part of the constructor to do the sort. We can say and we can say return my character. So now, because I said return my character and this function returns a character, Go understood that this slice of abilities is really instantiating a character. And I should be able to say, oh, I can't because I need to cast its character. Okay, so I need to give Go some help to let it know that this is in fact a character, because until it actually returns the value as a type of character inside of the function, it thinks my character is a slice of abilities. But here I'm telling Go it's actually a character, and you can go ahead and sort it because character supports the methods that make it sortable. And then we added another method, best, on here to get back the best ability, so that when we create our character, we can take their best ability and make it the primary ability for that class. All right, so this covers the basics about types in Go. The next, I think the next one I will cover structs, since they're just a type of type, and we've got types all over the place in Go. And it's, I think, a little bit more instructive to separate those two concepts, because it's not like Java where integers aren't, you know, there's an integer type, but then integers can't be extended the same. So, long story short, yada yada yada. I think this is a better breakdown. All right, and that's it for today. Um, I will see you hopefully in next Thursday.